Welcome to Returning to Soul, a podcast for lawyers and other high achievers seeking deeper meaning, purpose, and fulfillment in their work and lives. My name is Jessie Brown. I practiced law for 15 years before becoming a coach and purpose guide for lawyers and other high achievers. I also work as a meditation teacher, a breathwork facilitator, sound healer, and forest bathing guide, and I facilitate retreats in Sedona, Arizona. Today, we have a very special guest on our podcast. Maria Flanagan is here with us, and I first found Maria, we connected on LinkedIn. As many of my guests, I can't even believe the quality of people I've met through LinkedIn over the past few years. If somebody had told me 5 years ago I would be meeting people like this through LinkedIn, I don't know that I would have believed them. And Maria, I'm so happy to have you on with us today. Maria is a lawyer. She is the creator of Flanagan Law, and she also does volunteer work and has a very rich and interesting life. So Maria, I'm really happy to have you with us. Welcome.
Thanks, Jessie. I'm happy to be here. I really enjoy listening to your podcast.
Thank you. So Maria, one of the things that really stuck out to me when we started connecting on LinkedIn is I feel you're an example of a lawyer who has really created a career that aligns with your values, your strengths, what is meaningful to you. And I would love if you could just share with our audience a little bit about your journey from, maybe how you started out as a lawyer and a little bit of your path to where you are now.
Sure. So for starters, I didn't come from money. I put myself through college primarily on student loans. And I was lucky enough to get a job in procurement soon thereafter. I'd always wanted to go to law school, but I couldn't afford to quit work and go. And I learned about a school nearby that had an evening program that allowed you to work full-time while you went at night. So I applied and miraculously got in and slogged through that for the 4 years and the 3 summer schools between. And after I graduated, soon enough I was able to land a role as a sales contract negotiator for a software as a service B2B company. And I learned a lot there. The department grew a little bit. I transitioned into the vendor contract program head and also was in charge of their compliance program. We all wore a lot of different hats, and I had some really good mentors and was able to learn a lot there. One of the relationships I cultivated allowed me to be the first in-house legal hire for a small manufacturing company, and that was a bit of a stretch for me. I knew it was going to be a learning curve, and it was drinking from a fire hose for several years, but I had really good outside counsel, specialty counsel, and she was a wonderful mentor and remains a great friend. I learned a lot from her, and over time I was able to add value in ways that I hadn't before, and I could keep a lot of the things in-house that I'd previously needed to send to outside counsel. So that saved the organization some money and allowed me to be a little more autonomous and flex a little bit of learning new things. And after a while I realized, I'm on the board calls and in the room with the senior executives, and I'm still just senior counsel with senior counsel pay. So I thought, I'm doing GC level work. I have GC level accountability, availability, and responsibility, but not the title or the pay that comes with it. So talked to the CEO about it, proposed a modest pay increase backed up with market research, and didn't get the title or the pay. So I paused for a beat to reflect what's important to me. What do I really want? Do I really want to be GC, or is that just kind of checking the next box that I think I'm supposed to be checking? And I realized I really want to do good work for less than 60 hours a week and have a title and pay commensurate with the value that I'm actually bringing. So one of my friends and mentors from a previous employer put me in contact with a solo practitioner who had hung out his own shingle and was negotiating contracts for corporate clients. And 4 years ago, if you'd asked me if I ever wanted to work for myself, the answer would have been a resounding no. But I got really quiet. I thought about it, what was standing in the way of me doing that. And it was just sort of anxiety and overwhelm about starting something new and what if it doesn't work. So that gentleman was nice enough to meet with me, and honestly, he just made everything sound doable, not as overwhelming and as intimidating as before. So I had been fortunate enough to save up some money in case I hit a dry spell. I didn't want to trapeze without a net, as I like to say, so I spoke with several alternative legal services providers, and I got on with one just in case I wasn't able to sign any clients through my PLLC in short order. And, I put in a really long notice at work and no hard feelings. I think that was a really symbiotic relationship for the years that I was there, and I still am in contact with those folks now. I left on really good terms, but it, as you mentioned, it allowed me to kind of curate the life that I wanted, to think about what was important to me and not Maria from 5 years ago or 10 years ago or what I thought it was supposed to look like. And now I've had my PLLC for about 3 years and no regrets. It allows me to morph my schedule to kind of fit my personal interests, while also still performing good work on behalf of my clients. And I've had a wide range of clients, from solo entrepreneurs up to publicly traded companies. So it's been varied work, but it's also been very rewarding because I bet on myself and it paid off, and it allowed me to be a little more true, I think, to the ways that I wanted to add value and the parameters I wanted around work, and just to allow me to live a more fulfilling life to myself.
Thank you, Maria, for sharing that story. It's so inspiring. It's so inspiring because I feel it's doable for anyone who feels this longing to, branch out on their own or pivot. And a couple of the things you shared, I just want to reflect back your grit, your resilience, putting yourself through law school while working full time, nights and summers. That must have been very challenging. And then also this growth mindset of learning new things, drinking out of the fire hose, becoming the first, probably maybe the solo in-house lawyer handling all the things at this company, growing into new roles, learning new things. And now in the last 4 years, again, that growth mindset, learning how to run your own practice and just embracing that. So yeah, that's really inspiring. And I would love if you could share with our audience. I know before we got onto this episode and in the past when we've connected, you've shared you have a really full life that involves, kayaking, like spending time in nature. I know is important to you. You volunteer with some animal shelters, and you love to just play with the dogs. And I also know family is a really important value for you, and spending time with your grandmother. I think you said she's 102.
Yes.
And every 2 weeks visiting with her. So I'd love and you also do pro bono work. So I would love if you could just share with our listeners, starting your own practice like this, what has it allowed you to create and to bring into your life?
Sure. So initially, I think it was overwhelming to me because it felt like it was going to be two jobs. My daddy ran a junkyard and was a mechanic, and he worked for himself. And I saw how much he struggled with paperwork and, doing the kind of administrative things. And that probably turned me off from it. Plus, I'm an English major. I can write you a poem or a contract about it, but I'm not really going to be happy working in a spreadsheet. So that was, I think, intimidating to me to begin with. But for me anyway, and I'm not trying to build a firm with other attorneys and other employees working for me, there was some time investment up front, but mostly knowledge is power. And it was just learning, okay, how much is health insurance going to cost me? How much is a malpractice policy going to cost me? What's a good accounting and payroll software for me to get? And isn't like two jobs, one running the company and one being an attorney. It's a lot of it, honestly, for me anyway, has been kind of set it and forget it. So you have the corporate filings and you do it once a year and you have to pay these fees regularly, but a lot of the things weren't as overwhelming and intimidating as I thought they would be initially. And so because of that, I've been able to be discerning in the clients that I support and kind of the roles that I'm willing to take on, quite frankly. And so, yes, I kayak with my rescue bully, Otto, in the Pamlico River here. I go up to stay with my 102-year-old grandma every other weekend in Virginia and spend some time with my sister and the rest of my family then. And that's really important because she's the matriarch of our family, and she still lives at home and she still has her wits about her. And that's just really rewarding in a way. I feel like I can give back to her for so much of what she's done for me. On my way back from there, every other Sunday, I volunteer at a shelter that used to be near where I lived. And I get to check in with those dogs and go on the beautiful nature trails there and take them down to the creek to play in the water. Then there's another local shelter here that I volunteer with and just take the dogs out to the play yard. And that just fills my soul. That just, I joke that I work so I can support my dog habit. I have 4 rescue dogs myself. And then I also recently have gotten involved with a pro bono immigration work that has been the most rewarding thing I've done with my law license. So I guess, to hear you mention it, I have been able to curate that because of forming my own practice and realizing I didn't need to do the long days and wait until a future point in time to actually enjoy things. I wanted to savor them now when I know what they are, and some of the people I care about are still around and I can still spend time with them and do something that's fulfilling and enriching to me in the meantime, as well as supporting clients that I align with.
I love it. And there's so much to explore in what you just shared. One of the things I noticed is it sounds to me like identified or have a really strong sense of what your strengths are, what your gifts are, and what you maybe need to delegate or just minimize. And in the beginning, starting your own practice, I can very much relate to, I was also an English major, and anytime I had like a spreadsheet as a lawyer, I was like, help, like I need a paralegal, I need somebody to help. So I really resonate with that. And what I'm hearing is this set it and forget it. You found the systems that help you run your practice, but that's not the bulk of your time. It sounds
Correct.
to me like you're able to really do the work that does align with your strengths. And we always are going to have maybe a little portion of our work that is not a great fit, and we can outsource or get systems in place to help with those things. And I also hear that you kind of were breaking it down. It can probably feel overwhelming to go from working for an organization to starting your own law firm. But it sounds to me like you were able to kind of break it down into manageable steps and just take care of those, put those pieces in place that allow you to do the work that you do now.
Right. And again, I think one of the biggest things, and this has been true in several situations in my life, is the unknown is scarier. And so even if I had gotten information I didn't like, if malpractice insurance would have been cost prohibitive or it would have been a lot of work to get a company set up and to maintain it, then at least I know that. So I can make the cost benefit analysis. I can do hard things. I've gone to law school at night while I worked full time, but is it something important enough to me to make that sacrifice? But in this case, the knowledge was, okay, there's not a lot of overhead for a solo practitioner. There doesn't have to be, right? I can work from home generally. I can go into the office if my client's needs dictate it, but I don't need an office downtown for folks to come in and see me. I don't want to do ads online. And so I don't have high overhead, and it's just a trade-off. I'm sure it limits the number of clients that I have, but it also allows me to be discerning in the types of matters that I choose. And yes, learning that it's kind of set it and forget it from a company standpoint on a lot of these things took out the intimidation factor significantly. And to your point, there's always going to be little things that we have to do that aren't our favorite. But I just eat my veggies once a month. I go in and do my payroll once a month. I go in and do my invoicing once a month. It's manageable for the English major out there.
I love that. And I wonder for you, I don't even know here that you necessarily need to do this, but sometimes with those tasks that are really not like our favorite, identifying our why. I eat my vegetables so that I can have all of this, that this provides for me. If that helps with the motivation to continue, eating the veggies once a month, as you said.
Right. Yeah, I eat my veggies once a month so I can support my dog habit.
And what you were sharing earlier, to me, I know that phrase work-life balance gets thrown around and some people don't like it. So there's other alternative phrases, work-life integration, work-life harmony. These are like phrases in the type of work I do where some people like these phrases better than work-life balance. But I see your life as having this lovely work-life balance, harmony, integration, where you do work that's meaningful. As you said, you can be discerning with the clients, you have some control over your schedule, but also family, nature time, exercise and movement, being with the dogs, volunteering, giving back with immigration work and with the dogs, and with your grandmother as well. Like there's a lot of, balance. I mean, I'm curious for you, those phrases, work-life balance, integration, harmony, how do those land with you?
It's interesting that you bring it up because when you mention it, and I've also had a past client who's a dear friend now mention it, and I hadn't really reflected on it in that way, but it's true. And I think it just happened so naturally and so gradually that I didn't notice it, but it definitely is. Far fewer interruptions on a holiday weekend or late in the evening, or emergencies pop up. And I understand they're going to happen. They do in my own life and for sure with companies and company clients. But yes, it's a great deal of harmony and everything kind of dances well together for the most part. And sometimes, if I have a significant client engagement, I'll need to lay off with the shelter work for a few weeks. But, then it's just that much more rewarding when I'm able to go back to do it. And so it's a trade-off for sure. But it's one that I'm privileged enough to be able to make and I'm willing to make because we just get one shot at this. And I don't want to spend mine, marching to the tune of somebody else's drum. I want to eat the heart out of it.
I love it. I think that's what came through. I think even from your presence on LinkedIn, it was clear to me that you are a woman following your own inner truth, inner guidance, and creating a career and a life that does really align with your soul.
Yeah. Why is this lady posting about rescue dogs and seashells?
I love it. Well, as you know, I'm curious if you experienced this as lawyers. It can be easy to become a tiny bit one-dimensional because many of us came to law school with many interests, many things that lit us up, that we found important, and maybe we went to law school to make a difference in some capacity. And then we can get a little bit lost from that. The profession can be very demanding, especially if we're working in a law firm or an organization. So I'm curious for you, did you ever feel that way? Like now your life feels so varied and you have all these different components. Did you have a time in your life where you weren't able to devote as much energy or time to these other facets of life?
Sure. I think it's a trade-off and it's an investment, and thank goodness I didn't have to dwell there. I visited there, but I didn't have to dwell there. Certainly working for a company and being a sole practitioner there, or the entire legal department, is very time consuming. And of course firm life is. I've never worked in a firm, but I understand that it's way more demanding even than a corporate job. And to your point, I think it's easy to become one-dimensional because you define yourself by your role, and that's what puts food on the table and affords you certain luxuries. And some of us, worked really hard for it, and so it's understanding that it becomes a part of who we are, because if we tease that apart, who are we absent that? But also, I think a lot of companies and a lot of firms don't encourage you to be anything other than one-dimensional. Even if you had time to pursue your interests, they probably should fall within certain parameters. And Maria, you probably shouldn't talk about rescue dogs and native plants and seashells at the mixer. So yes, there have definitely been points in my life when I was a thinner version of myself than I'm able to be now that I work for myself.
Wow. It's very helpful, I feel, for our audience to hear this, because many of them are stuck in that, it's not stuck, but they're in that place of
It's
maybe
tough.
Yeah, and there's one of my favorite poets. I have a few of his books right here, but David White, this is one of his little books. He has a poem where he says, anything or anyone that does not make you come alive is too small for you. And I feel that with when you're sharing your story, even though your work sounds like it was actually a really good experience you had working at this organization, and I know you still have great relationships with the folks over there. But for many of us, there comes a time where it feels too small for us. There's like a wanting to burst out of, I think of sometimes the hermit crab, the shell becomes too small and it needs a new shell, or the snake sheds its skin, or the butterfly,
Right.
needs to emerge from the chrysalis. There's a struggle and an urge to expand in some way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense. And a reason, a season, or a lifetime, and those prior roles served me well, and I feel like I served those companies well, and built some really good relationships and learned a lot. But yeah, I can also understand a lot of people in the legal field and other fields struggle with identity and struggle with not having enough time to do everything that is important to them. And there is a bit of a shedding or kind of realization that can come into play.
Yes, absolutely. And I love what you said about, none of this prior experience was wasted. It was all actually part of us becoming who we are now. So it's all valuable. It's
Right.
very valuable. The skills we developed, the maybe less insights about our own self, or the relationships, the connections, all of it.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's a great point. It's not just the relationships with others, but it's also your own self-realization, and maybe you changed over time as well.
Absolutely. And one thing you shared earlier that I found profound was this sense of I can do hard things. I went through law school, night school, while working full time. So these experiences, I mean, law school is hard, and passing the bar exam is hard, and starting out as a lawyer, all of these things. So I get the sense that you really discovered your own resilience, your own grit, which serves you probably in all of, many areas of life, to just have that understanding of yourself.
Sure, my daddy would tell you that I'm, and my sister probably too, extremely stubborn and strong-willed. So that probably has been a theme throughout my life. But I did it. I mean, it was doable for sure. We had some really good classmates. It wasn't competitive like I think a lot of the day programs are. It was like a family. We were just propping each other up to get through it. And I still have some connections with my cohort as well. All these years later, we were such a huge part of each other's lives for so long. But yeah, we can do hard things, and I think it's important too. Is it the hard thing that you want to do? Because I could do the hard thing 60 hours a week, missing dinner dates and not being able to go to the shelter to volunteer with the dogs. But is that the hard thing that I want to do, or do I want to maybe just stop hiding behind my hands and peek at the screen to see what it's going to take to actually start up a business in North Carolina? And that was easier to me than continuing to maybe miss out on things that are really important to me.
Yes. I love this question, is this the hard thing I want to do? Because you're right. Many of us who made it through law school, who became lawyers, or there's many other demanding professions out there, there's a lot of things we could do, and I lived like that for a long time. Can I do the job of, yeah, I can do it. I can shape shift myself. I can force myself to do a lot of things. But is it what I want to do? Is it what my soul wants to do? Is it aligned with my nervous system, my body, my needs? All of those questions.
And that can be exhausting. That's its own form of exhaustion, right? Is trying to fit into this mold that isn't necessarily who you are, or to your point, shape shifting, or, thinking about which fork to use. Am I pronouncing this word appropriately? Those types of things that just aren't necessarily true to who we are. And practicing law is hard, it's just what's important to you. And I enjoyed, and I know some folks are looking for a big shift or a big pivot, and I enjoyed practicing law. I love reviewing and negotiating contracts. I love the analysis and the play of the words together, and the attention to detail. I didn't not want to practice law, but I didn't want to do it in a traditional way anymore. And it's just it was a different hard.
Yes. And something you shared, a couple things came to mind. One, you shared earlier that even having like hobbies and side interest can be challenging in some legal environments, not all, but in some firms, maybe some organizations. And it reminded me of a story when I was a newer attorney. I think I was a second-year attorney at a large firm. And we had this dinner, and it was all women attorneys at the dinner, maybe 20 or 30 lawyers. And somebody mentioned that one of our male colleagues, who he didn't have a family, he was a single guy, he was volunteering on the weekends at a winery. And that's what he loved. He loved wine, and he would give tours at the winery, and he loved the vineyard, and that was his thing. And a partner who was a very senior person essentially called him into her office on Monday and said, "You must not have enough work. I hear you're volunteering at the winery on the weekends." Yeah.
Wow.
So is it a surprise that within a couple of years he left to go in-house?
Right. Of course. Or maybe even, start to work at a winery.
Right.
It's unbelievable and sad.
Yeah, it is. And stories like what you've done just demonstrates, if people are feeling that this is too small for me, or this isn't working for some reason, maybe their interests have changed, or there's other, maybe they have a family member with some health issues or something.
Sure.
They just want to have a little more autonomy, control over their time, their workload. There is a path forward. And something you said earlier that I think would be really helpful if you could just speak to briefly, because I think a lot of us deal with this, is facing the unknown. So there's probably a lot of unknown in going from working in an organization for a long time to starting your own firm. And I wonder if you could speak to what helped you navigate that uncertainty, because it is what keeps a lot of people, especially lawyers, we kind of have a risk aversion. We've trained
Yes.
those parts of our brain. So what helped you to, move through that?
Sure. So again, I will credit the solo practitioner who was gracious enough to give me his time and talk about things in a way that made them not seem intimidating, and to talk to somebody who had gone through it in the similar community was really helpful. And then I think too, just getting quiet and thinking about what was scary about it, and thinking about what was so intimidating, and getting to the bottom of that. And I know also for me, and I imagine a lot of attorneys, reputation is really important, and I've never really cared what people thought. I always wanted to be honest, but I didn't really care if people liked me, or if I was too much for them, because I found that I generally always have been. But I think it can be scary for people to lose face, because if I take this leap and it doesn't work, then I've got to tuck tail and go back, and people are going to talk about me. Who cares? If they're sitting in a women's team building luncheon talking about a dude volunteering on the weekends, do you really care what those people think anyway? And I think probably the fear of the unknown and saving face prevents a lot of people from doing a lot of things that would be balm for their soul, and unnecessarily, because what matters at the end is whether you're happy doing what you're doing, and if you're being true to yourself, and if whatever you're doing now is chafing in some way, then get curious, get quiet, and figure out what it is, and maybe some small steps that you can take. But I think talking to somebody, for me, who had done it was a huge help, because suddenly this thing that seemed so overwhelming, and like I said, a full-time job in and of itself, suddenly wasn't nearly as overwhelming, and then you could just kind of dip a toe and nudge a few things along in the meantime while going about the rest of your day. That conversation just, I think, pulled the scales away from my eyes about what was possible, without a tremendous amount of output.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's wonderful. I mean, I think it's such a great example of how our brain, when it's faced with the unknown, will concoct all kinds of stories and fears and make it much bigger and overwhelming, than it actually is. So talking with someone like this person who helped you can kind of put those things to rest, put it in perspective, and help us move forward. As you said, even if it's a small step at a time, that's okay.
Sure. And, and I thought, because as I do as an attorney, and to your point, kind of being risk averse about things, all right, if this doesn't work, worst case scenario, what? I go back and get a job. Or if the market's horrible, I work at Hallmark for a while, or, something. I'll figure something out. I've done fast food. I've worked at a convenience store. I can figure it out. And I will have some money coming in somehow, but it's just scary, I think. It can be, to just kind of step into the unknown. But if anybody has questions and is curious, I'm happy to talk to them about it. It isn't legal advice or business advice, but I can just talk about my own lived experience. And if it takes a little bit of the scary out of it for anybody, then it's worth it, because it's at least worth evaluating and considering. Even if somebody decides not to do it, that knowledge is power too.
Yes. Well, thank you for your generous offer, Maria. And I'm curious, both if any of our listeners are interested in connecting with you, where they can connect with you. And then also, I would love just to hear a tiny bit about your law firm services, and in North Carolina, if there's anybody, who's looking to connect with an attorney, where you might be able to offer your services.
Sure. So I'm on LinkedIn, Maria Flanagan. And I have my own practice, Flanagan Law PLLC, and my website is flanaganlawpllc.com, and there's a contact us form there if anybody's interested to get in touch. As I've mentioned, my passion from a legal standpoint is contract review and negotiation. I also have experience with governance light and securities light types of things. I always like a throat to choke in those instances, but I've been able to save some clients money by taking a first pass at those types of things. I've been corporate secretary, so I'm familiar with the governance and corporate hygiene types of matters. So primarily my PLLC practice is mostly vendor contract review and negotiation.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Maria. Well, we'll put those ways to contact you in our show notes for our listeners. And it has been such a pleasure to have you on today. I've really enjoyed getting to know you, hearing a bit more about your story. I know it's going to be inspiring for our listeners. So thank you for spending this time with us.
Thanks so much, Jessie. I really do appreciate your series. I think it's eye-opening for a lot of people, and it lets folks know that there are others out there who are considering less traditional paths, and there's a way to be true to who you are in all the ways. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Maria. Well, to all our listeners, thank you for spending this time with us. If you found this episode helpful, please subscribe to our podcast, like and subscribe. Please share this with any of your friends who might benefit from this episode. And this is Returning to Soul. I'm so glad you're here. Until next time, be well.